morning to Goodmorning BSN, the 64th edition of this Tuesday morning program. Today we have an exciting show for you, as usual, brought by Business School Netherlands, sponsored by the Culture Factor and Chint Solar. The general idea of these sessions is that we bring you practical knowledge that at the beginning of your day that you can put immediately into practice after this Zoominar has finished. And we do this surrounding the 4 pillars that we think leadership is all about. The 4 pillars are responsible leadership, change leadership, decision-making leadership, and performance leadership. And today's topic is all about or surrounding responsible leadership. We have a great presentation and a great reflector today for you. The presentation is being done by Hans van Buijten. Hans van Buijten is a senior lecturer at BSN, especially in his specialism, and that's action learning. He's also an action learning coach, and he's also a partner at Connected Action Learning. Hans we know very well because he is a big part of our school. Then, as a reflector, we've got Bern Gafar. He's speaking to us from Nigeria, where Hans is sitting in the Netherlands. But Bern is in Nigeria, and he is the Deputy General Manager of Evans Therapeutics Limited, and he's also Head of Sales. So he will be able to give great reflection on what Hans is going to present. As usual, Hans is going to give his presentation, Bern is going to reflect on that, and after that, there's loads of opportunity for you all to ask your questions. Please, as we can't see you, put your questions during the presentation and reflection or afterwards into the Q&As that you see at the bottom of your screen, or otherwise use the chat. I will try to moderate this show, keep an eye on the timing, because the intention is that we close this show at exactly 10:08 so that you can proceed with your working days. That also means that I'm going to ask the questions that you write in the Q&As or put in the chats again at the bottom of your screens. May I invite Hans van Buijten to start up his presentation?
Sure. Thank you, Twan. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for introducing Bern as well. What I'm going to do is to share a new perspective on anger and share my view on its impact on leadership. So let me start off by saying that a perspective, or my perspective, is not the truth. And we know of professors working in the same field having really opposite beliefs or meanings. So it is a perspective, and please keep that in mind, and it might be a real new one. So as Twan already shared, I'm action learning coach, I'm action learning lecturer, so I would love to start with a few questions. So please raise your hand if you ever felt anger or have been at the receiving end of anger during a meeting. And do you think that anger was useful? Your own anger, or the anger of a team member or a team leader? Do you think anger was useful? Do you think anger is ever useful? Our perspective is that anger is more than useless in all situations. It's more than useless. We think that we don't decide on becoming angry. We think our perspective is that anger is there. It is triggered. I will tell you more about it. And we don't decide on it. So it's not, do we have anger, but does anger have us? So why do we think anger is useless in all situations? It decreases creativity, it decreases rationality, logic, humor, passion, reasoning, clarity, wisdom. That all decreases. It's the result of sympathetic nervous system activity. And I see sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system activity as connecting vessels. So as sympathetic nervous system is active, parasympathetic nervous system is inactive or really low. And that's what we need to ask the right questions. That's what we need to get access to our own creativity and the creativity of our team members, and logic and reasoning and humor and wisdom and fun. And what are then the consequences of these decreases? The consequences of these decreases is that connection is gone. So there's a beautiful English saying that anger is the wind that blows out the lamp of the mind. Trust is broken. The trust in your team will be broken. So you can say about trust that trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. So real anger, especially if you are the leader of a team, these are the seconds that break trust in your team, and it takes forever to repair. And what about psychological safety? So when leaders use their anger as a force, how safe do their people feel? How free are how free are they to ask questions, to have an opposite meaning about subjects that matter? So a perspective on anger is that humans are likely to feel anger because they believe something shouldn't have happened. So this colleague in the team has done something and the leader says it shouldn't have happened. Or it means that something is wrong, or someone should have done something or shouldn't have done something. The question is, where is anger created? In the beginning of my short presentation, I told you that we don't decide on anger. So where we experience anger is not where it is or has been created. So this is an AI image of our mind, of our brain. And I think brain is the physical part and mind is what it is creating. And we have this frontal part of our brain or our mind, which we call I. And we have this unconscious, deeper part of mind, which we call self. And you hear people tell that they say, I can't get myself to stay calm in meetings. So we make a distinction between I and self, and I is the thinking part of mind, and self is the feeling or emotional part of self. So what is this perspective on why that is happening? From this perspective, I've learned is that our unconscious has what we call prime directive. So the main reason, the main task, I would say, of our unconscious mind is our physical survival. So we all don't have to think about blood pressure, heart rate, digestion, respiration, or healing. And those are just a few examples of what our unconscious mind is doing. It's regulating all those functions in order to sustain our physical being. So the primary goal of our unconscious mind from this perspective, and I'm repeating, it is a perspective, is our physical survival. But it also creates emotions like anger, fear. It creates physical sensations. So what are you experiencing when angry? Is there a pressure in your head? Is there tension in your body? What changes in your breathing? What happens with the power in your jaws? These are all changes we can notice if we are aware of that. Physical sensations, impulses, and habits. So the unconscious mind is regulating all these bodily functions in order to sustain us. But it's also creating anger, for example. So when is our mind creating anger? The moment our unconscious mind gets information through our senses and reads that information as a threat, then it creates either fear or anger. And in that way, our mind is not very different from that from, for example, a zebra. So when zebra sees that another zebra is mounting its mate, it will run to the other zebra and want to bite it. So in our modern society, anger is in fact useless from this perspective, because we're never going to bite people. It's something we don't do. And we don't want to fight with people. But the impulse comes from unconscious mind reading information as a threat. So we see anger as a survival mechanism designed to prepare us to fight. In the world of animals, it's to prepare us to bite. And in your leadership role, when anger gets triggered, we think it's worse than useless. Connection disappears, trust is gone, and psychological safety is transferred to unsafety. So how can you get rid of anger? And this is also a perspective. We think because anger is created in our unconscious mind, we think we have to address both the conscious thinking and the unconscious emotional mind. And we gained quite a bit of experience with it. So the impact on your leadership, when your anger won't be triggered anymore, when, in other words, your unconscious mind stops reading information coming through senses as a threat, it will just forget to happen. So in order to deal with anger with your conscious mind, it takes a huge effort. It takes awareness. You have to do all kinds of things to calm down. You have to decide on keeping your mouth shut, let the balloon empty itself, and then reconnect to your people. But this is another way. This is another way where I communicate with both conscious and unconscious mind, and stop this data processing error, stop the unconscious mind reading information as a threat to happen. So you will become a cool, connected, and safe leader.
Thank you so much, Hans. Inspiring words, a good perspective. I'm eager to learn what Bern has to say about this. So, Bern, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Hans. Thank you, Ton. Good morning, everyone. Quite a very succinct presentation by Hans. Thank you. My own perception of anger this morning, yes, it's been well explained. Anger is a complex emotion, and like Hans said earlier, it's perceived as a form of threat or frustration. It's like preparing ourselves for a fight. However, anger can be seen as sometimes being useful and sometimes being useless. As leaders, we should manage our anger in such a way that it brings actually leadership success. We can be able to drive our team in actually propelling them forward to enhance change. Now, the presenter talked about anger being worse than useful. It could trigger positive and negative response from our team. Let me talk a little bit about sometimes when there is anger as a leader, and it could trigger some positives. Usually, because we manage people with different character, different opinions, and different backgrounds, sometimes some form of anger might help our employees and our team members to probably sit up. So some of the advantages is that it signals passion and commitment on the part of the leader. It can also help to drive urgency. Sometimes when you give assignments and you put timelines and you do a proper follow-up, and you realize that some team members are actually not doing what they're supposed to do. Depending on the way you present it, like Anne said, you use the brain is the physical part, while the unconscious mind can help to perceive anger. But how do you manage it in such that you turn it into a positive response from your team? When it is well marshaled based on emotional intelligence, it can help to motivate innovation. It can help to drive positive change. It can help to also help your team to focus on solutions rather than frivolities. It can help to maintain professionalism and to ensure there is assertiveness. However, like the presenter said, in most cases, the negative effects of anger as a leader far outweighs its benefits. And most times, and like especially in big organizations, like you've noticed, there's most companies have what they call company's handbook. And one of the subtopics is to ensure there is no workplace bullying, which anger can elicit. When there is anger and is not well marshaled, it can lead to a reduction in collaboration and confidence on the part of the team members. It can erode trust. Hans talked about the fact that you can take years to build trust. However, within some few seconds of showing anger, you can erode that trust away. It can damage relationship between team members or between leaders and their team. It can lead to a toxic work environment among team members, and it can lead to stress and burnout, reduces stress and burnout, and there will be job dissatisfaction. And invariably, or in the long run, it can cause increase in turnover of staff within that organization. You see people withdraw from the way they work. I once had an experience where we promoted in-house a female staff to become a middle-level supervisor. And because we had not quickly sent her out for training on how to be a supervisor and manage people, she invariably started showing some level of anger because she was not managing her team very well. And the team members reported to higher authorities that she was talking down on them and they were ready to resign. 3 or 4 of them were ready to leave the job. So we quickly had to manage the situation, sent her out for training, and coached her effectively on how to manage people. So anger usually damages relationship, lead to toxic work environment, reduces productivity, and can invariably lead to a very high turnover of staff. However, much as we as human beings, Hans talked about anger as a survival mechanism. Sometimes when we are under pressure as leaders, maybe when our team is not delivering their numbers in terms of meeting targets, we use anger as a way to deal with such threats and such frustrations. And because we are emotional being, he talked about the physical being the brain and the unconscious being the mind. We are all emotional beings and we react differently. But as leaders, either as middle-level leaders or top-level leaders, we must manage our anger in such a way that it would elicit positive response from our team and help them to focus on their solution and drive them to positive change. Now, there are some strategies that we can use to ensure that our team deliver better. Strategies for anger management as leaders. We can develop our social skill, how to manage people, how to work within teams, and ensure that we bring out the positive. We can do develop our what they call self-awareness and self-regulation. Then as leaders, one of the major things we have is to show empathy. Empathy goes a long way, and there might be many reasons why people will come late to work or why they will not deliver their targets. It might be domestic issue, it might be non-official issues, but as leaders, when we have taken our team to that level where they can come to us, for every time your subordinates or staff is not talking to you because they see you that you are an angry leader, then they are talking to somebody else. And if you lose your team, then you lose the staff, and there will be low productivity, and such will walk away. We also ensure what they call feedbacks. At every time, you give a medium-term, short-term, medium-term, and long-term feedback. So the level of the point of getting angry when the targets are not delivered will be eroded. So in order to build trust, you must manage our anger very well. So in all of this, one of the major things as leaders that we have to ensure that we don't get angry or we manage our anger very well is to show emotional intelligence. This is one of the key points as leaders that we have to develop to ensure that we don't get to the point where we see anger as a survival mechanism. Hans talked about the fact that we should use each effort to develop self-awareness and emotional intelligence. In conclusion, I want to say that as leaders, we need to negotiate the path to develop ourselves as responsible leaders with a positive change mantra through action learning, decision making. That way, we can, as leaders, we can turn our anger rather negatively, or we can turn it as a catalyst to one, ensure positive change, one, to drive improved performance, and also ensure increased productivity and achieve both personal and organizational growth. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bern. Interesting perspective as well, in addition to what Hans already told us. The time is now open for you to ask questions. So to all the participants, I've got one question in the Q&A box already, but it's the opportunity for you to ask the two gentlemen your questions and what's keeping you busy surrounding this topic. The first question is from Giri Matona, and she is asking, I think this is a question for Hans, what underlying need or unmet expectation is driving this anger, and how a leader can minimize its impact on the working environment? Question, but hopefully, Hans, you have something to say about it.
Yeah, it's a great question, Twan, and thank you. I explained a bit about actual triggers of anger. The idea that something happened which shouldn't have happened, or the idea that something is wrong. It can be wrong in your team, it can be wrong in the organization. Someone can act in your view as wrong, but also let's not forget that experiences, especially the overwhelming experience in our past, which haven't been processed. So what I mean by that is that if we don't process overwhelming experiences in our lives, and it starts with the acknowledgement that we all have those experiences, then that can also trigger. So this perspective says that if an experience is overwhelming, our mind stores information about that experience in a big way. You could say it's like big data. And if something in the here and now resembles the thing that happened in the past, anger can be triggered. And why does the unconscious mind then trigger anger? Because its prime directive, its main target is our physical survival. So the intention of our unconscious mind is really, really positive. It wants us to survive. It reads information as a threat, and that's why it's creating either anger and sometimes fear or anxiety. But today's topic is anger.
Thank you so much. There's a lot of questions coming in. One remark from Olabisi telling us that emotional intelligence and good communication skills are important. But there's a couple of questions from Guus, your colleague, Hans. So perhaps for both of you, the question from Guus to you, Hans, is to reflect upon Bern's vision, and hopefully Bern can reflect upon that again. So that's his question.
Okay, thank you, Guus. Yeah, I mean, I love it when people have a different perspective than I do, because I mean, I don't hold the truth, so that's fine. But my perspective is really also from my personal experience. If I became angry in my team, the people I was leading, or even in the team I was part of, and a colleague promised me over and over to do something and he didn't, and I, let's say, like a volcano exploded, it really harmed my relationship with that colleague. And it didn't lead to him doing what we decided on, or doing what he promised me to do. So in my personal experience, my anger was more than useless. It didn't help. It damaged my relationship. It damaged connection. It damaged trust and safety. So to be really open about it, this colleague in my board of directors, he was avoiding me. He was avoiding me like the plague. And that didn't happen. In my situation, it didn't happen. So I have a different view of that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Hans.
Okay.
I think a question for you, Bern, before you reply to that, because it's close to what Hans is telling us. Obina is asking us, if anger is completely useless, how can we convey our disappointments in a workplace?
Oh, wow. That is a great question. Well, of course, we are the action learning MBA school in the world. So the best way to do that is ask questions. Ask the one you are disappointed in what happened, why she or he did the things she or he did. So ask and try to really understand why things happened as they happened, or why things didn't go the way you thought they were going to go. So it's questions, it's this leadership with questions. Professor Michael McGard, one of the titles of his book, Leading with Questions, it's that works. That works so much better. And I see another super interesting question about how serious the effect of anger is on an individual health. I personally think that if we have continuous feelings of anger, it will really harm our health, because it will impact the quality of our sleep. It will impact joy and humor and passion and all those positive things. So it will really impact our health in a negative way. So it's great from a health perspective to get rid of it.
Yeah. Thank you. Bern, you're on mute, so we can't hear what you're saying if you're trying to respond, but please pitch in if you feel the need to. There's one comment for you from Hawa, and he's from Victor, and he's thanking you, Bern, for the perspective you explained anger, which could be positive and negative depending on the motive. And then a question from Remco Roos in Dutch. What to do as a leader when one of your team members gets angry in a group setting and makes you angry as well?
Oh, Remco, what a great question also. What I would do is what I wouldn't do is start arguing. So trying to persuade the other with logic or with reasoning, it's comparable, and I'm going to share a metaphor which you probably never will forget. It's comparable with force feeding someone who is vomiting. So it really doesn't work. You can't force feed someone who is vomiting. So if one of the colleagues in your team gets angry, just take time for the anger to calm down. It will probably take about 12 to 15 seconds, maybe a bit longer. And you will sense that the anger will go down. Your own anger, as a result of her or his anger, will go down as well. And then just take your time and say, okay, let's take a few seconds or half a minute, or maybe let's get a cup of coffee and then get back to where we were on the subject we were discussing. That's what I would propose to do.
Same go, Hans, if and that's a question from Augustine. The question is actually, how do I respond to a boss that's prone to anger? So it's the other way around. We're just talking about a team member being angry, and now it's the boss being angry. So it's more difficult to steer that.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm now sharing. Requires courage, and the way I would do that is not tell the boss what he or she is doing, but share what the impact of the anger is on me. And for example, tell her or him that the anger makes me uncertain. I would love to go and leave the office, the room we're sitting in. I'm afraid to ask a question. I'm also afraid to share my opinion. So really reflect on the impact of the anger of my boss on me. So that's something different than blaming her or him. It's sharing what the impact is on me. But it takes courage. Because it's also vulnerable. Telling that the impulse is to leave the room. Whoa.
Makes sense. Bern has left our Zoom meeting, or at least his connection has dropped off, so we have to do what you want. There's one remark from Hawa telling us anger is indeed useless. It usually leaves one with regrets of actions taken under the influence of that emotion.
Yeah.
That's a remark. And then there's a question by Joop van Nierop, and he's asking you, leaders, like other people, can't always hide their disappointments about disappointing results. Why couldn't this have, by exception, the function of a wake-up call for managers and teams? I emphasize by exception.
Yeah, well, expressing disappointment is possible without anger. So, for example, if I would be disappointed with one of my team members, one of the questions I could ask is, what if you were in my shoes? What do you think is happening within me? How should I react on your promise and not your delivery? How can we really have a meaningful conversation about what is happening here? Can we be open and frank about it? I think the impact of such a conversation is sustainable and positive. and has also a focus on learning. So I'm not going to share that I am angry and disappointed because I have the right to be, but that I can feel the anger, and I realize that my anger is not functional in our context, but I do want to have a meaningful conversation, an open conversation about what it means for me, for the team, for the organization.
Thank you. We're coming close to the end of this Zoom webinar. I will ask one more question. Please respond shortly, Hans, so you can close down at 10:08.
Yeah.
The question is a combination of two questions, one coming from Augustine and one coming from Coletti. And the first one is asking, why are some people more angry than others? And can anger be regulated at the time it's being angry, and be seen to be controlling it at the same time?
Wow. Well, why are people sometimes more angry than other people? I was referring earlier to overwhelming experiences in our life. That if these experiences still have an impact on my leadership in the here and now, and my unconscious mind reads information as a threat and creates anger, then it's really linked to these overwhelming experiences, probably. So the way to stop this huge anger is to process that overwhelming experience, like with what we call life-changing conversation, where we address both the conscious thinking mind, but especially the unconscious mind, because that's the part of mind where this emotion is created. And the other question, when it happens, take a time out of a few minutes. Say, this is impacting me emotionally, it's impacting you emotionally. Let's just take a few minutes, walk to the coffee machine, or even walk 5 minutes and come back in the room, and then have the right conversation. So don't act from anger. It doesn't. It's the metaphor I was using. It's like force feeding someone who is vomiting. It does not work, I think.
Thank you so much, Hans. Thank you to both presenters, Hans and Bern. Unfortunately, we don't see Bern anymore. There's a last comment from the public stating that you have to work on yourself to be able to control your anger. And yes, you can do that. So that's a more nice final remark that I would like to speak out to all of you. This is the end of today's session. Next week, we have a promising new session coming up. Same time, same place, same day. It's a presentation done by Bruno Ebinum, reflected upon by William Blaker, and it's all about the dynamics of team building in the 21st century. Thank you all for participating today. Hope to see you back next week. We as a panel are going to stay on, but for the rest of you, it's up to your working life, your daily working life, trying to get that knowledge with you to your seats in the office or in the company that you're working in, and try to learn from it. Thank you all. Thank you especially to our panel.